Let's talk some chess. This is an important game in chess history. It's round 3 of the U.S. Championship in 1963. This was played in New York, New York. And the names might look a little bit familiar because we've seen in the Game of the Century, as it's so named, which I've reviewed on this channel, Bobby Fischer playing against Donald Byrne, which is Robert Byrne's brother. So a nice little full circle chess story here. Bobby played the Game of the Century when he was 13 years old, and then 7 years later is playing Donald's brother, Robert, in the U.S. Championship. So let's see how Bobby continues his streak against the Byrne bros. Byrne here opens up with d4. Bobby plays knight to f6. We have c4 by Byrne, g6 by Bobby, preparing to fianchetto the dark squared bishop, and similarly by Byrne, g3, preparing to fianchetto his own bishop. And we're going to see a lot of bishop parallels in this game, so get ready for that. It's sort of funny to see the bishops being very symmetric. First, Bobby plays c6, so preparing to play d5 and cut off any potential fianchetto light square bishop, but Byrne just plays bishop to g2 anyways, and here Bobby plays d5, getting a nice central pawn and sort of cutting off the reach of this bishop. Byrne takes on d5, Bobby takes on d5, and now Byrne plays knight to c3, attacking this pawn twice with the bishop and the knight. And it is properly defended by the knight and the queen, but Bobby has to be careful because, of course, if either of these two pieces move, then this will be a very nice pawn for Byrne to capture. So Bobby starts with bishop to g7. Now both bishops are nicely fianchettoed. If the knight ever does get to move, then the bishop will have an open line on the d5 pawn. Sorry, on the d4 pawn, which is currently defended by the queen, but nice to sort of have. And in response to that, Byrne plays e3, adding support to this pawn in case the bishop ever does end up eyeing it. We have castle kingside by Bobby and knight g to e2 by Byrne, so nicely connecting these two knights. And Bobby brings his own knight to c6, adding another attacker to this pawn, although, of course, it is defended by another pawn on e3. We have castle kingside by Byrne, b6 by Bobby, preparing to fianchetto his bishop to b7, or another move, which might be better than fianchettoing in this position, Byrne plays the symmetric b3 move. And here Bobby, instead of fianchettoing the bishop, which I just alluded to, hopefully I created some suspense. I don't feel like I did. I didn't build the suspense well, but anyways, he plays bishop to a6, which is a nice move because it pins the knight to the rook. This knight maybe wants to come to f4, maybe you want to move this knight and then replace it on c3, but now the knight is pinned, because if it moves away, then Bobby just wins the exchange after bishop takes rook, and that's great for Bobby. So a nice little developing move here with the bishop, and Byrne plays a very similar move, bishop to a3, now pinning the pawn on e7 to the rook, so exact same idea. And this is what I was talking about some funny bishop symmetry earlier on. Both bishops on the king side are fianchettoed, both bishops on the queen side are on the a file, and both of them are pinning a piece to the rook, so a nice little fun bit of symmetry as we move along in this game. Here Bobby brings his rook to e8, so breaks the pin of this bishop. He wants to move the e pawn forward, and you obviously can't do that when the rook is on f8. So here Byrne plays queen to d2, getting the queen off the back rank and connecting the two rooks very nicely. And Bobby strikes in the center with e5. We have d takes on e5, knight takes on e5, and now is the sort of the critical moment in the game. Both sides have developed all their pieces, both sides are working to control the center, both sides have castle kingside, so it's sort of about finding a positional advantage, or more importantly in this case, not making a big mistake. And unfortunately for Robert Byrne, this was the position where it all sort of started to get away from him. And he has a good idea in this position. He has the right idea for the move, but he doesn't pick the right rook. And what I mean by that is he plays rook f to d1, and he lines up the rook and the queen on this d5 pawn. And this is the right idea. You want to add attackers to this pawn right now. So now you have the knight, the bishop, the queen, and the rook. You want this pawn to fall and sort of start to control the center, but he needed to play rook a to d1. And the reason for that will become clear. For now, just note that the rook on f1 is defending the f2 pawn, and that will become important as we see what happens in the game. So unfortunately for Byrne, he plays rook f to d1. Again, right idea, but the wrong rook, which is obviously tragic if it happens in the US Championship. And Bobby jumps right into it with knight to d3. And now this is a really annoying knight to deal with. because it's controlling 8 squares in, I guess not all 8 squares, but it's controlling a ton of squares in Byrne's camp, and it's a problem, and of course you can't take it with the queen because it's protected by the bishop, so this is a very annoying knight to deal with. And here, unfortunately, Byrne does not deal with it in the correct way. The right way to deal with it is knight to f4. There's a couple reasons why, we'll get to it later, but here you challenge the knight, of course, and you threaten to capture it on d3. And here, Bobby could play knight to e4, so getting his other knight into the game. After knight takes on e4, pawn takes. Now this is still a better position for Bobby, but not as bad as what's happening. The knight can, if it wants to, can take on d3, but then it's replaced by a bishop, which is super strong. But this is a better defense than what happened. And I'll explain sort of why in a moment. But what happened instead of playing this knight to f4 move was Byrne played queen to c2, which again is a decent idea, but it doesn't work. The idea behind it is that now, let's say Bobby just makes some sort of silly move, then you get rook takes, bishop takes, queen takes, and now Byrne has just won a knight and a bishop for a rook, which is a very fair trade, especially considering how active this bishop and this knight are. So that's kind of the idea. Getting the queen out, allowing a discovered attack from the rook, and threatening to capture those 2 pieces. But now we have an excellent move by Bobby that took advantage of Byrne's sort of 2, I don't know if blunders might be a strong word, but took advantage of Byrne's past 2 moves. So see if you can find that move while I give you a moment. Okay, this is, it's always exciting when you see a sacrifice in a major championship, and that's exactly what Bobby plays here. Sorry, that is not what Bobby plays. That is not what Bobby plays here. Bobby plays knight takes on f2, and this is a really tough move to see. The bishop is now unleashed on this diagonal. You've taken away an important pawn on f2, and Byrne is pretty much forced to capture this. The knight is attacking the rook. It's a very annoying knight deep in Byrne's camp, so Byrne has to take it with the king on g1, or on g2. I'm sorry, on f2. And the whole idea behind the past couple moves we've seen Byrne make, remember there was a rook on f1 that was protecting this f2 pawn, so if the a rook came to d1 and Bobby brings the knight to d3, then you can't take on f2 because then rook just takes, and that's totally fine. The other sort of mistake we noted that Byrne made is after Bobby puts the knight on d3, then Byrne has this knight to f4 move. This move works as well because now you, again, don't have knight takes on f2 because then queen can take on f2, and this is also okay. So the knight moving from e2 is sort of allows for, a discovered defense of the queen on the pawn, so that was the correct way to defend in this position. But, unfortunately for Byrne, 2 mistakes in a row, first bringing the wrong rook over, then bringing the queen over, not evacuating the knight from e2 to allow the queen to properly defend f2, and now you have a knight sitting on f2 that the king is pretty much forced to take. So king takes, but now you get the other knight running into the game with knight to g4 check. And now things are starting to get a little bit difficult for Byrne to deal with. You don't really want to march your king up the board, so instead it makes more sense to move it back to the first rank. Also staying off of the light squares because of this monster bishop that's just eyeing this diagonal. But now you get knight takes on e3, and this, of course, forks the queen and the rook. So at minimum here, Bobby's going to win the exchange, and there's obviously a lot of pressure with his pieces on a suddenly very exposed enemy king. So here, Byrne brings the queen to d2. Obviously, you don't want to lose the queen. You'd prefer to lose the rook in this fork exchange. But that's actually not what Bobby plays. Bobby doesn't take the rook. He's not interested in material. He's interested in checkmating his opponent and getting a decisive attack here. And Bobby sort of sees that this diagonal is going to be very important in the attack. And right now, the diagonal is very properly defended by Byrne's fianchettoed bishop on g2, so Bobby decides to remove that bishop with knight takes on g2. Again, you pretty much have no choice but to take the knight, so the king takes the knight on g2, but now Bobby opens up this diagonal that he just removed a defender from with just the really saucy d4 move. And this is a pawn sacrifice. Byrne just takes it with the knight on d4. But now you've opened it, you've removed the defender and opened up this diagonal. So there's no bishop and there's no pawn anymore. And now you just have bishop to b7, and this is a devastating check. We'll see why it's devastating in a moment. So the bishop is just controlling this diagonal really well. There's no way to block. You can't, of course, block with the knight on d5. Bishop would just take. The queen and the rook, this knight literally cannot. I guess this knight can block and be silly, but so the king has to move, and again, you don't want to move up the board. You want to move down the board, so the king now moves to f1, trying to, you know, potentially run away to safety, get closer to these pieces, because it is, again, starting to get, you know, there's a lot of air here. There's only 2 pawns on the king side, and you have the rook bearing down in the e-file, the bishop slicing this way, so it's starting to get tricky to sort of find a place to run. But it does sort of look like Byrne has maybe figured out a way to avoid this attack or survive this attack. And Byrne is up a knight. He's up a knight for a pawn. And if he is able to, you know, these pieces are not, they're not on the back rank. They're developed. They're reasonably active. So if he's able to survive this attack, maybe he can get his material advantage working and get an attack going. But that's, you know, Bobby does not allow that, and Bobby actually ends the game on the next move. He makes this move, and Byrne resigns. So see if you can find the way to finish off the attack for Bobby and win round 3 of the U.S. World Championship. Not the U.S. World Championship, the U.S. Championship. I don't know why. I'm used to saying World Championship. Okay, the proper move, which is a chilling move because it's so subtle and doesn't look like it achieves much, but it is queen to d7. And after this move, Byrne resigned the game, and Bobby gets a win in round 3 with the black pieces, and puts his name, he stamps his name even further on the map of the chess world. So what's going on here? What's the idea? Why is this such a, you know, chilling, threatening move? Let's, you know, make a move here with the white pieces. I think Stockfish recommends just bringing the knight to a better position on b5. Now you have queen to h3 check, and there was no way to stop this move. The king can't come to g2 to protect g3, of course, because the bishop is guarding these squares. There are no other pieces that can, you know, guard g3, so, or sorry, guard h3. So there's no way to stop this. So after you move the knight, queen to h3 check, and now you're in a lot of trouble because the rook is cutting off these escape squares. The queen is obviously bearing down. The bishop is supporting the queen, and there's not, you know, many squares for the king to move to. So king tries to stay on the first rank with king to g1, and it's okay right now because the white queen is defending this g2 square. So Bobby can't play queen to g2 checkmate because then just queen takes, and obviously the attack is completely over. But now Bobby has a really saucy move to make sure that this queen stops defending g2, and that's bishop to h6. And this is just a wonderful clear and sacrifice. Also a nice bit of symmetry. The light squared bishop moved from a6 to a7. The dark squared bishop moved from g7 to h6. So nice little sort of shifting of the bishops. And the idea here is this is clearly a bishop sacrifice. The queen is being attacked, but you can't take the bishop because, of course, then queen to g2 is checkmate. So you can't take the bishop, but the queen is also under attack. So you don't want to lose your queen, so you move your queen, but the queen has to stay on the second rank to defend g2. But there's not many good squares for the queen to go to. Let's say the queen goes to, in fact, there's no good squares for the queen to go to. Let's say the queen goes to c2. Well, then Bobby has this bishop to e3 move, and this is just completely devastating. The king cannot move anywhere. Again, you have bishop, you have queen, and you have bishop cutting all these squares off. So the only move here is queen blocks on f2, but now you get queen to g2, and now this is checkmate because the white queen is pinned by the bishop, and obviously the light squared bishop is protecting the queen, which is checking the king. So unfortunately, after Bobby makes this bishop to h6 move, there's no, this didn't even happen in the game. We're just going over the line. There's no way, after this h6 move, there's no way for the queen to simultaneously stay on the second rank and protect g2 and also prevent the bishop from coming to e3 with check. Even if you put the queen on f2, then you just get bishop to e3 right away, and now nothing you can do to prevent checkmate in just the next couple moves. So just, this attack didn't happen, of course. Byrne saw this, and the game ended after the chilling queen to d7 move. But just an awesome game, an awesome attack. Obviously, in a very high stage game. But hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed Bobby versus the Byrne brothers round 2. Thanks for watching. Drop a like, drop subscribe, and we'll see you next time.